Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm chatting with John Passalacqua from First Phosphate. So guys, if you're unfamiliar with First Phosphate, well, there's a lot going on here. You might think that it's a mining company, which it is. They are in the middle of a 25,000 meter drill program right now, but that's not really the story. The story is that they want to be the first company in North America to create purified phosphoric acid for electric vehicle batteries, which is something that doesn't really exist right now. And if you are paying attention to the macro environment, LFP batteries are now the predominant battery that Tesla is manufacturing. In other words, if you're trying to invest in battery metals, I think that First Phosphate has a very unique position, and it's a name that you probably should take a look at. They've signed MOUs with various industry leaders, and they've basically put together the building blocks for what could be a monster company if John is successful at getting this company to the finish line. All right, everybody, enjoy the interview. John, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah. Hi, Steve. How you doing?
So, since we last spoke, there was an article that the Northern Miner put out that I found really interesting, and it just talked about how there basically has been this transition with electric vehicle battery chemistry where, you know, we used to be very focused on the nickel, manganese, cobalt, or the NMC batteries. And we've really sort of seen Tesla really flip the switch heavily towards LFP batteries, which is lithium iron phosphate. And I found it kind of interesting because when you first brought us First Phosphate and the first time we sat down and discussed the company, you discussed how this transition was going to happen. And I find it interesting because at the time, there's just, you're getting tons of information, all these different, experts that are talking about what's going to happen with battery chemistry. And a couple of years later, it looks like the path that you said we were going to go down, we went down. And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about what's happening right now in the electric vehicle space and why it's so important for investors to understand the transition that's happened in electric vehicles if they are investing in battery metals.
Yeah. So I guess it's really important to understand is that, Tesla did start with the LFP battery in North America, and they did get the price of their vehicles down to under $40,000. And that was huge. That was before they got slapped with the IRA disbenefits. But because of that, if you go anywhere in North America nowadays and you take an Uber, a lot of those taxi cabs are a lot of those Ubers are driven by guys who own Teslas. You get into a Tesla. So that's a real strong sign of mass adoption. It means that somebody who's driving an Uber for a living can buy a Tesla and can run a business on it. And the reason for that is because they got the battery so cheap. And they got the battery so cheap because, a battery is like sometimes, 40% of the cost of the car, especially in the smaller vehicles. When we say a battery in a normal fossil fuel car, it's just like a little dirty thing in the corner. But when you say battery in an electric vehicle, it's everything. It's the engine, it's the battery, it's a driving shaft. So, it occupies a very expensive and important part in the automobile, in the electric automobile. So when you reduce the price of that, like LFP battery chemistry is about, 50 to 66% cheaper sometimes than their analog nickel, manganese, and cobalt batteries. You could get the battery down by quite a bit, right? Like multiply 40% by 60%, right? That's 25% savings in the cost of the vehicle. So lithium iron battery is the future of mass adoption in electric vehicles because it gets the price down. Not everybody can afford a very expensive electric vehicle. And if you look at the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, in order to get those subsidies, your vehicle has to be under $55,000. So it's all going to be LFP. LFP is going to be very big moving forward here. And the other thing people need to know is it's very stable in terms of a chemistry. It doesn't have the same fire problems that you do with nickel, manganese, cobalt batteries. And that's another reason that they're moving to LFP. So think about it from Tesla's standpoint. The fires are gone with LFP, and also the price comes down to something that's affordable, and you can punch out a lot of them and create a mass adoption market.
So let's talk about First Phosphate here. And it's interesting to me that you guys, you have drilling going on, but this isn't really a junior mining story, despite the fact that you have actually a pretty large drill program in the works right now. Your end goal, as I understand it, is to get to creating purified phosphoric acid, unless there's another vision that you ultimately see that going to. So we've also got all these different MOUs that you've had to establish in order to basically create this company from the ground up to producing purified phosphoric acid. Can you walk us through sort of all those different components that make up First Phosphate and ultimately what that end goal is, and really what the big hurdles are here if I'm an investor and I'm trying to say what's going to prevent them from being successful?
Yeah. Okay. So, first off, we are active on a lot of fronts. And for one simple reason is there was no LFP battery infrastructure in North America. So it's a supply chain that has to be created from scratch. So rather than, wait for others in different segments to appear, what we've done is we've focused on one segment, which is really the mining of the phosphate material. But then we use other very well-positioned companies in subsequent areas of the supply chain to build out the whole supply chain. So when you come to First Phosphate, you can see the whole supply chain that will take you from igneous rock, which is a phosphate rock that's then processed to phosphate concentrate, that then is then processed into purified phosphoric acid, which is then made into LFP cathode active material, which then is made into battery cells. Battery cells go into battery packs, they go into automobiles and energy storage systems. Now, of course, no one company can do all of that unless you're CATL or BYD, that they're fully vertically integrated. But what we've done is we sort of vertically integrated with a partnership network, because we think it's going to be a team sport in North America to stand up a supply chain. There's nobody that can do it on their own. So, we've almost created sort of the demand for our own product that will come out of the mine. We've shown that, this is how it will progress to, being in an electric vehicle or a battery energy storage unit. So
I know you maybe can't name some of the specific companies you're working with, because large companies often they're a little sensitive about talking about their partners. But maybe you can give us an idea of what the companies you can talk about, and also the ones that you can't talk about, what value add they're bringing along the supply chain for you to get to this end goal of creating purified phosphoric acid.
Yeah, so most of these companies have already been announced through MOUs that we work with. So, to make the phosphate concentrate, we're using the laboratories of SGS Quebec. So we've been able to make phosphate concentrate. Then to make purified phosphoric acid, we've made that through Prayon. Prayon is one of the world's largest producers of purified phosphoric acid out of Belgium. And then from there, we have a couple partnerships with technology companies that make LFP cathode active material, being Integrals Power, Lithium Australia, and Altian Technologies. And all three of those companies have the ability to mix the purified phosphoric acid, phosphate, and source of iron to make LFP CAM. And then we have offtake agreements with companies such as American Battery Factory and Altian, who need that LFP cathode active material to make battery cells, which they want to make in North America. Our vision is to make the whole supply chain stand up in North America. And we work with those like-minded companies that are on the same trajectory as we are, and to benefit from the same philosophy.
So there's also, as I understand it, a pretty big difference in how purified phosphoric acid is being made in, say, China, where they have a little bit more freedom and flexibility, we'll say, in terms of the damage that they can do to the environment versus what the standards are here in, say, Canada or the US. Can you maybe talk about why the purified phosphoric acid that you're working towards would make more sense from an environmental approach than, say, what is currently being produced in China?
Yeah, I mean, China, they are moving towards a more modern system as well, because they just can't handle the environmental damage being done as well. But generally, traditionally, they would take low-grade phosphate ores, sedimentary ores, and heat them to high temperatures with coal, create a lot of CO2, use a lot of energy in the process, create a lot of radioactive dust, and be able to make a lot of purified phosphoric acid from it by cracking out the phosphate from the host mineral. In the Western world, we use the wet process, which you take sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid attacks the phosphate rock, and it releases the phosphate, and then the phosphate that is released is turned into purified phosphoric acid. But then the problem is you get slag piles of gypsum, which is radioactive when you use sedimentary rock. But we at First Phosphate are using igneous rock. And because of the low levels of radioactivity, actually no levels, almost zero levels of radioactivity in the igneous rock, all of that gypsum can be used to make plaster and wallboard. So it can be completely recycled into secondary economy. And that's really important for the battery industry, because it doesn't make sense that we're making a battery to decarbonize the world, but then we're polluting the world to make that battery. Like, that doesn't make much sense, right? So all the processes around these batteries have to be clean. And that's another reason why we're building our network of partners in North America, is because the processes have to be different than what they are right now in China.
So this is a major concern that I have for the nickel industry, right? We've got a whole bunch of these low grade nickel projects, and the company's argument is, well, this is class 1 nickel. It's a lot better on the environment than class 2 nickel, which is coming out of these laterite projects in Indonesia. Do you think that there's going to be a real actual push when it comes to looking at these battery metals, like even say for First Phosphate, for the OEMs, whether we're talking about say General Motors or Honda or whoever, to purchase a cleaner purified phosphoric acid than say a much cheaper alternative that exists in China?
Yeah, so I mean, on your first question about the nickel, I don't know if you've heard, but in Australia, they're trying to give incentives to the cleaner nickel. I don't know how that would work. I know the European Union is also talking about a battery passport. So in order for a vehicle to get into a finished vehicle or a partially finished vehicle, to get EV vehicle to get into the European Union, there would have to be certain standards that they have to look at in terms of how were the parts of that car made, what were the emission standards, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be like, a green passport. In North America, instead, we've got the Inflation Reduction Act, which says everything has to be made in North America, point and full stop. And there, at the beginning, when the North American Inflation Reduction Act came out, that was not the case. But they recently updated that in December of this past year to make it such that all the components have to come from North America. So in that sense, I think there is big incentive for all these materials to be sourced out of North America as opposed to somewhere else in the world. And yes, I mean, the pricing is an issue because, I call it environmental arbitrage. I mean, if you can make something in one part of the world and, dump the sulfates or whatever it is in ammonia into the river, and it costs you less because you do that, and you don't have to have the best labor standards, so your product is lower. Then you come to North America, and obviously we want a healthy, safe environment, and we want good labor standards. So our products is going to be more expensive. So yeah, there has to be some type of a what you would call the passport or the import duty to equalize all of that. Wouldn't it be wonderful though if the whole world could just be producing on the same standards? But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. And we have to understand that, just because we're polluting one corner of the world that's on the other side of the world, it doesn't mean that it's not coming to us. Like, I think if you remember when the nuclear reactor in Japan started to melt down, or the one in Chernobyl, it didn't take more than half an hour before the radioactivity was picked up all over the world. So, we're not so far apart anymore, right? And we've never been far apart. The ecosystems of the world are all interrelated. So it's important that we watch, our environmental footprints everywhere. And it can't just be that, one group is doing it and another group is not doing it. So, that's where I think, we really need to come to a consensus, right? Like a level playing field in terms of, what are the expectations on production standards around the world.
Something that we've noticed on social media, a question that comes up about First Phosphate is that you guys have signed a lot of MOUs, which this is, and I'm not trying to put you in this bucket here, but you know how it is in the Canadian junior markets. There's just so many bad actors and, for lack of a better word, scams out there. What's your response to people who see that you've signed multiple MOUs and they say, why are these necessary? These are just news releases. What's your response to people on social media that are critical of the company for what, in my view, it's a great thing, but what's your response to the skeptics?
Yeah, I mean, so, I think what people need to understand is, an MOU, memorandum of understanding, is an expression of intent, right? And it's an intent from both parties. Once an MOU is signed, the parties start to work on those items that were mentioned in the MOU. So I guess let's go back in general to, is an MOU important or not important? I think there's and I can maybe give some guidance to your readers on how to assess an MOU, if you will. I mean, first of all, look at between which parties is the MOU, right? Who's on the other side of the MOU? So we've had, an MOU with Prayon, the world's largest producer of purified phosphoric acid, or one of the largest producers, a company with $1.5 billion euro turnover. Second thing that I would say to, people who are skeptical is, how easy do you think it is to put together an MOU with a company like that? Like, you can't put out a press release on an MOU without the other side, first signing the MOU and then it going through their press department, their legal department. Like, it's a whole process. A company that embarks on an MOU with you, especially a major company, like most of the ones that we have are, I mean, we've got one with Norfalco, which is a subsidiary of Glencore. We've got one with Sun Chemical, which is a subsidiary of a Japanese company with $150 billion market cap on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Like, these companies have processes, right? So they're not going to just put together an MOU for the fun of it. Like, sometimes these MOUs could take up 6, 9, 12 months to put together. There's an establishment of intent, and then after that, it sort of kind of binds you. It's kind of like, hey, we're dating, and then you look to get engaged, or you look to get married. So I think these MOUs are very important. I think they give direction to the company, direction to the market, direction to the shareholders. And I think, I would caution people. Let's not always be so cynical out there and always assume the worst out of people, but let's just scratch a little bit beyond the surface. Who's on the other side of the MOU? How long do you think it actually took these companies to put this together? What are the words that are actually expressed in the MOU? Like, actually read the MOU. Like, that has to be agreed upon by both parties. Otherwise, it's false, right? And these MOUs are looked at by our internal legal counsel. Sometimes they're looked at by the Securities Exchange before they're submitted. Sometimes by the regulators. I mean, it's a serious process. So yeah, I just think people need to really, just assess a little bit better around certain things and ask a few more questions before passing judgments on things.
There's definitely, and I think what you're getting at is that there's definitely a lot of anger and negativity right now in the junior markets, which, I know you have experience in the capital markets, trading and investing in juniors. And I've chatted with people who have been in this industry for, 30, 40 years. And I hear almost all of them tell me that this is the worst market they've ever seen in their entire career. And I'm curious here, because I mean, this is not a forward-looking statement. It's not a recommendation, but I feel like if you went public with what you have here in 2020, this would easily be a $2, $3, $4 stock all day. But now we're in a market where capital's not really flowing, but you're still working your butt off, getting in front of as many investors as you can, talking about your deal to as many companies or as many potential investors as you can, institutional investors at that. I'm curious here. Let's forget about retail for a second. They're definitely not happy with how the junior markets are going, but you are talking to, I imagine, some pretty large portfolio managers, institutional investors. What are those conversations like right now?
Yeah. So, I guess, you have to do the best with what you're handed. We came public February of last year. The market, I think, really started nosediving March, April of last year. And so, we have never known good markets, right? And even before then, we did 3 raises on this company, and all 3 of them were done in like bear market rallies. So it's been very difficult for the junior space through that whole period. I mean, it has made us very resilient. Like, we just don't know anything else. We only know, difficult times. So, when times get better, we hope to be there. And, we just continue to build a business. People just say, well, what's this? What's that? I said, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not upset about our share price. It is what it is. It's just, those are what risk rates are at right now. We continue to build a company. We continue to be prudent with capital. Yes, it is very difficult for a lot of companies to raise serious capital because there's huge dilution, but we've managed it pretty good to date. We raised $8.2 million just before Christmas. We raised that mostly at around 50 cents. So that was a really good raise for us, and it's going to give us lots of life. Gives us up to 18, 24 months if we really need to stretch it, and even beyond. So I just think you need to just work with what you got, be positive, continue to build a business, and eventually it will shine. I'm not going to take on any of this negativity. I mean, it's just there's no need for it.
So, John, for investors watching or people who are interested in the story, if they want to watch the company through 2024, what are the milestones, catalysts? If they want to evaluate the performance of management, what should they be looking out for over the remainder of the year?
So we just announced a ginormous drill program, 25,000 meters. I think it's one of the biggest drill programs going on right now, probably in all of Canada, for sure in Quebec. There's a spot that we know has got a lot of phosphate. We already did 4,200 meters of drilling. And with these 25,000 meters of drilling at the property called Baie-Jean-la-Marche, we know that this will uncover the full, how would I say it, silhouette around the phosphate, which lays on surface. And it's only at 70 kilometers from the deep sea port. It's very near workforce. It's very well supported by the local municipality and indigenous group. And so, that is a big one, right? We've put about $5 million into drilling that. There's two drilling companies on the job right now. There's 3 drill rigs. There could be a 4th. We started that late January. We expect to have it done, April, May at the latest. And then after that, we're moving right into a 43-101 and a PEA, because we know it's, we already know from the last drill program that it's going to be a deposit that's worth doing those 2 studies on. And from there, we're able to get through to the end of 2024. And then the other thing that we indicated this year, which is already done, is we created a purified phosphoric acid sample that met battery grade specs with Prayon from our phosphate concentrate from the Baie-Jean-la-Marche area. So, hey, we know that the phosphate can be made into purified phosphoric acid. That's really important. And we're slowly advancing our plans for a purified phosphoric acid plant at the Port of Saguenay. And we're also looking to co-develop an iron phosphate, which is a precursor to making LFP. It's when you take phosphate and iron, you mix them together, you get iron phosphate, which is a precursor to make LFP cathode active material. So we're working on that as well.
So the end goal is not necessarily to make purified phosphoric acid, but now to make iron phosphate.
Yeah, I mean, eventually to make iron phosphate and LFP cathode active material, again, not on our own, together with really significant partnerships where, risk is spread out and, we're not trying to take on the world. Our real focus is, getting the mine going, getting the apatite out of the ground, which is the phosphate, and getting it purified. We think that's the holy grail. The critical minerals are the holy grail.
Well, John, I appreciate you hopping on here. And as a shareholder of First Phosphate, I appreciate how hard you've been working. I know that the market's been challenging, but I think that you've done a great job of moving the company forward. It's clear that you're working your butt off for shareholders. And I know that you probably don't get a lot of appreciation. And in a lot of ways, it's basically a thankless job unless the stock goes up 300% a year. That's just the way it is in small cap. But for myself as a shareholder of First Phosphate, I see how hard you're working, and I really appreciate that. And I believe that when capital starts to flow back into junior names, First Phosphate is going to be a name that a lot of investors are going to be looking at. And I'm really excited to see what you're able to accomplish over the next coming quarters.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, Steve. We're just building a business, being patient. So when the time does come when, it's not a stock market, but it becomes a market of stocks, those stocks that shine, we hope First Phosphate will be one of them. And I can also tell you, we have great supportive shareholders like you. They see us working so hard, our team. And they're when they look sometimes at the share price, just like at all of these juniors, they get upset at the market. They don't get upset at us. They're always saying, like, I can't believe it. I can't believe this market. They can't realize all your hard work. So, that really motivates us, right? So we have very supportive shareholders. I would say over 95 to 98%, but I got to knock on wood before I say that, right? Because that's a really high number, but we've got really strong support out there, and very, very pleased and thank you and all of your listeners for, always being a source of light and a source of sanity out there, right? And let's just let this storm just play out. There's nothing we can do. What they always say out there is, you can't time the market. No one's bigger than the market. You have to go with the market, not go against the market. You don't want to stand in front of a bus. So, hey, let's just all relax and build businesses. And when this is over, it'll be over. Then cards will be on the table and we'll see who's built the businesses and who hasn't.
Well, John, thanks so much for hopping on here, and hopefully you'll come back on in the future to continue to update our audience on the story.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. All the best.
All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this interview, please smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Also, let me know what you think in the comment section. Thanks, everyone.